Hey everyone, welcome to the Broken Meeple, and have I got a doozy for you? Whoa, yes, I'm going to try and keep this to around the 15-minute mark, maybe 17-18 minutes max, but blimey, this is going to be tricky, because on Mars, yes, LACERDA does it again, a giant big box Euro game from Eagle Griffin, and, you know, if you're into this designs, like, well, I am for the most part, you are going to get a heavy brain-melting Euro experience. At least that's what is expected. This one got so much hype when it was announced, as LACERDA games generally do. It's getting a lot of buzz as it's being played, particularly by the heavy Eurogame fans. The question is, does it deserve all that? Or is this going to be like a certain other LACERDA game, which I'd rather not mention? You know, we'll have to see. You know, because he started off like fantastically for me. And then Escape Plan, oh damn, I mentioned it. Oh no! Oh well, Hail Marys later. And it really didn't do well for me. So I'm hoping that this one is a comeback. With On Mars, I'm going to put this down for a minute because it's heavy. You know, On Mars is this big Martian game. Funny enough, you know, everything's about Mars these days. Where you are settling colonies on Mars. Each player basically has a player board with all these different resources and tech spaces on it, and what you're doing is you're building these buildings on the surface of Mars in order to generate resources as well as, you know, allow yourself to build more of the colony up. But you're also trying to achieve specific mission objectives, which will get you points, some extra gems, which are basically spend gems to do lots of bonus actions. And all the while, you're having to decide between being on the surface of the planet and going off into orbit. Because the game is kind of two halves. It's an action selection game, but you only have so many actions on one side if you're on Mars. The rest of the actions are if you're in orbit. And there's a shuttle that goes between the two, but its frequency of how often it does that is dictated by the game length. So you have to basically decide, when do I need to go to orbit? When do I need to be on the planet? Where am I in turn order, because other players might, you know, do something before you can. And of course, you're trying to micromanage a ton of resources, these different contract cards with more special powers you can unlock, scientists potentially, rockets with more people. My god, you know, technologies, are you going to use your own, level them up, use other people's? The game has a lot in it. And I'm going to try my best to keep this video short, but there's a lot to go through, so let's get on with it. Is it worth it? Let's go into detail. So duration, yeah. No! Sorry, what, did you really expect any more?
40 seconds, but I wanted no!
Yeah, this is a long game. Even the solo mode is going to take you a good while, but, you know, a two-player game can still set you above 2 hours. You know, it's long. There's a lot going on. You're going to be rules checking a lot. There's a lot to explain, so there's a lot to set up. So you've got to go through a pretty hefty setup and takedown process and explain the rules. Even with two of you, it's going to take a while. And even if you know all that beforehand, it's still going to take you a while. You're talking 90 minutes to 2 hours at the fastest time humanly possible for two players. But with 3 and 4 of you, even at your decent speed, this is going to take you 3 hours. Probably longer. We're talking between 3 to 4 hours, I would say, with a 4-player game, particularly if any of them are new or even slightly slower than the average, you know, Speedy Gonzales. It's kind of crazy. And there are reports from people who have played this for the first or second time, and it's taken them nearly 6 to 7 hours. I am not joking. I have seen this in person happen. You know, the game has a lot in it. It throws a lot at you, and it's going to take you a while to absorb it in and get to grips with it. And for those first few plays, it's going to take you a long time. So if you're adverse to long games, you might want to be careful about how often you sink your teeth into this one. So yeah, not a short game. I mean, the solo mode is probably the shortest way to play it, which is not a surprise, but there's a lot of micromanagement in that as well, so again, that is going to take you a while to get through it. Anybody who can play a game of this in less than 90 minutes, I swear, is lying through their back teeth. It's like, there's just far too much in this game to do in that time of time. For ease of play, this is where things go a little bit downhill, but not to a huge extent. The idea is that, yes, this is a heavy game. It's LACERDA. Of course, you go into these games knowing that they're going to burn your brain and be quite an investment to learn. This one is certainly made easier by the fact that the rulebook and the training video that it goes with this was done by Paul Grogan of Gaming Rules. Yes, I know, shameless plug, whatever. But, you know, credit where it's due. The rulebook in this is actually pretty good. You're going to be rules checking it a lot, because you can't remember everything that's going on in the game. There's a lot of nuances here and there, a lot of little things you need to know, and there's just a lot of rules in general. You know, you are going to be teaching this for a good 45 minutes or so before you can even start the game. It's quite insane, and one reason why I'd rather play this with the same group of players, but more on that later. But the rulebook has been written in a good way so that stuff makes sense, and a lot of that comes down to Paul Grogan's editing skills. But then also the video that he's done for it. If you try to go into this game without watching that video, you are really, like, hurting yourself. You need to watch it. And I'm not just plugging for the sake of plugging. Trust me, I watched the video and read the rulebook, then I started teaching the game. It was so much easier as a result to do that than had I just picked up the rulebook and gone solely from that. You need a visual representation of what on earth is going on in this game to be able to understand it fully and avoid the classic 6 to 7 hour first game that some people are having with this thing. But that being said, even when you do conquer the rulebook and the video and all that stuff, this is a sheer cliff for a learning curve. Oh my god. You know, and this is going to hurt the game a lot, because with some of these other LACERDA games, I feel like I can teach them to certain other players who are used to medium weight games and they'll be fine. Or they'll get an idea of what they're supposed to do. But here, this does not hold your hand. I mean, these first colonist variant things that they put in the game are frankly rubbish. They're garbage. You know, whoopee, we advise you to follow these cards. Right, plonk this building down and you get to pick up a B card. Oh yeah, what do I get in the B card? If you do this action, you get a single crystal. Yay!
Well, that was pointless.
Garbage. Seriously, they do not work. They're not worth it. It will not help you learn the game. Trust me on that. But it's difficult to know what you're supposed to be doing in this game. You know, so many people, even math teacher friends I have, who beat us right royally on a lot of Euro games because they're just that good at them.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
Struggle to figure out what they're supposed to be doing in this one, because it doesn't really give you any indication of how you're supposed to do well. Now, that is an indication of a good, solid, heavy game, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree on that. But you got to accept that this is going to be a game that you're only going to want to play with the same group of 4 of you all the time. You're going to be really hesitant to want to teach this game to someone new unless you like playing games for 5 to 6 hours. Me, you know me, I don't like that. I like to wrap my games up in a decent amount of time. I know this is going to take me a good 3 hours. I want it to take about 3 hours, max. Not 4, not 5, not 6. And if I have to teach this to new people all the time, it's going to end up like that. So you want the same people all the time, which means it's not going to hit the table very often, because I have to play with lots of different people each week. And so the chances of this one hitting the table more than these is quite unlikely. And a lot of the problem comes from the theme itself. You're building a colony on Mars. Okay, where do I start? Rockets are cool, I guess. Maybe get a technology. You know, do I want a shelter first, or do I need a water thing first? And what about the scientist? I don't know, I can do them all. It gives you so many options to do, and it just overwhelms people's minds. But think about it with this. In this game, you're thinking, where do I even start? Let's take the gallerist, for example. Okay, well, you're running an art gallery. Well, first, I could probably find an artist. Okay, step 1, go get an artist. You know, step 2, well, I kind of need a painting from them. Okay, I could buy one. Oh, I could get a contract over there that says I want this particular painting. Okay, I could do either or whatever. But I need the artist. Now I need the painting. Okay, cool, I've got the painting. Now what do? Well, I need to make the artist famous. Okay, so, well, promote him in the radio station. That works for me. You see, it's a clear, linear progression of thematic reasons why you're doing A, B, C, D in that order, and it makes sense. Vinyos, another great example. You know, you're running the wine business. Well, okay, I mean, crying out loud, you don't have to be an expert in wine to know how wine's made. Okay, so where do I start? Well, vineyard would be a good start. Oh yeah, I'll go get a vineyard. Right, well, I've planted some vineyards, so they've now generated a little bit of wine. Great. And at that time you might have got something in order to improve the quality of wine, because let's face it, you don't want to drink rubbish, do you? So now you've got the wine. Okay, what do I do with that? Well, I could sell it to the shop or put it in the fair. So what do I need right now? Money? Well, then I'll go sell it then. What's the object? Oh yes, I want to be the most popular wine business. Well, then I'll put it in the fair. And that's the thing. These things lead on from each other. Yes, they have complex ways to do it in the sense that, these different options that you can do, but you know that you have to get the vineyard and then get the wine and then get the barrel and then go to the fair. You know you need the artist and the painting and then the promotion and then the sell the painting. Here, you ain't got a clue where to begin and even less of a clue where you're going to end up. So it really will not hold your hand, and if you're worried about being overwhelmed by too many options or no clear indication of what you're supposed to do well, then you might want to skip this one. Because you're going to have to invest a lot of plays and a lot of time in order to get to the level where you're comfortable with this. And if you don't have that time available, or you don't have that group available, then this is not going to give you the same level of enjoyment as it could give another person. So once you've climbed that huge cliff in order to actually get used to this game, was it worth it in tactics and strategy? Thankfully, for the most part, yes. There is a ton of stuff to do in this, and I cannot cover everything in this video, otherwise this video will go on for twice the length it normally does. But there's certain elements that I really like. First and foremost, that whole shooting between orbit and the planet. So on one side I've got these actions, and I need to do these, and I can do them for as long as I can, but eventually I'm going to have to go back up to space. Now, in the early part of the game, when the colony's not very well built, the shuttle was going back every single turn, so it's quite easy to plan for, right, I'm going to go here, right now I'm going up, and then back down again, and that's quite straightforward. But as the colony gets bigger, then the shuttle doesn't go back quite as frequently, like every 2 turns or every 3 turns eventually. And so you have to plan even further ahead, because now you know that I'm going to go down to Mars and I'm going to be stuck there for a good long while. It's like, do I really want to spend that long on Mars? And I like that. But on top of that, this is definitely a game that rewards forward planning. You cannot just take it and see how it goes. I mean, you can if you just want to learn the mechanics, but if you want to try and win, you need to think ahead. You need to know how many resources you're going to get from a build. You need to know how many resources you're going to need for the next thing you want to do, like the scientists or grabbing ships, etc. You need to know what your storage capabilities are, because you only have a limited storage to begin with. You have to build shelters in order to get the storage up. You don't want to waste your resources when you build something and you haven't got somewhere to store it, because that's very wasteful and you could have used that for something really good later on. So, especially with the shuttle going up and down, again, you've got a plan for that.
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
You have really got to think a good half a game ahead of yourself in order to do well at this. And that's a good thing. I mean, this one does, if you're in that kind of heavy Euro side of things, then this is going to give you exactly what you want and not make it too convoluted in the sense of like, I got no idea what on earth I'm supposed to be doing right now. But there's certainly a very big overwhelming thing that I see from players where it's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to do this and this. I have no idea if it's going to do well, because you really cannot see if what you're doing now is going to reward you later until it gets to that point. The technology tiles, I like the idea that you can bounce off other players, so if you've got a technology I want to use, then you have a potential to develop that tile further. That's quite cool. It encourages some player interaction. So if I've got a tech that I think is going to be popular, then great, I'm holding on to it. You guys give me some nice stuff, come on, give me. And that works quite well. Again, doesn't work in a 2-player anywhere near as well. So you can see where I'm going with this. 4-player adds more interaction with the players, whereas the 2-player doesn't. One little beef though is that the Mars landscape is a little bit dry when you look at it, really. You get a few little spots where some discovery tiles will appear and the odd gem and a couple of little spaces that you can develop text on with the rover, but it's quite a minor thing. It adds to the theme, but it's quite minor in terms of its game effect and gameplay. I also don't like the fact that the buildings are very generic. The buildings are literally just, here's the mine. You put a person on it and it gets you a wild resource. You've got the shelters. They give you more room for your people. Okay, great. And then you've got generic blue, generic green, generic white, generic grey, and I think is there another generic on top? I forget. That's the thing. I can, what have we got? 4 generic buildings. And they don't do anything different. It's just certain things have a different cost. Batteries are good for techs. The others are good for, they have like a chain. So this resource builds this building, the resource from that builds that building, the resource from that builds that building. And it makes sense, but I just wish they had some other thing rather than just being generic. Because when you build them on the map, you're forced to kind of group them together by the way the rules are set. So a big complex is just a case of, oh well, I get more resources for that. Anything else? No, not really. It's just a group of buildings that do nothing once you've built them. They're just spaces for you to put these contract cards on, which are cool because if you were like combo building, then the contract cards are going to be really good for you because they give you extra executive actions, the bonus actions to do, providing you have the crystals or the scientists to basically power them. And this is definitely what's going to make you a bit more differentiated from other players. Because if you were to take those out, everybody would be pretty generic. It's like, whoopie-doo, I built a few white buildings. Whoopie-doo, I built a few blue buildings. Yay. Anything else? The contract cards are what allow you to have that little bit of a differentiation by saying, I've got this combo going where if I abuse this, this, and this, I'm able to do this basic strategy that everyone's going for in a different way and do it more efficiently or better than others. The scientists are not to be underestimated because you get the right contract card with the right scientist on top of it. Oh my god, you can create some literally game-breaking combos. And I have seen some pretty doozies as I've been doing it. I've even, shall we say, partaken in a doozy or two with these contract cards. You know, if you spend the whole game not taking any contract cards, you're really kind of suffering a little bit in the long run because you're not going to be able to keep up the momentum of doing something legit. So there's definitely plenty in this game to keep you going, and that's not even everything. I mean, you've got increasing cost for actions, you've got all the different sort of discovery tiles that come out that give you bonuses, you've got the rover in general, moving it across the map, and you've got the rocket ships, bring back rockets, you get more people, you can use the rocket ships in order to fly up and down from Mars to orbit quicker. There's so much going on. There is a healthy dose of tactics, and there is a deep dose of strategy. Definitely, if that's what you want heavy tactics and strategy, then look no further than this game, because it will give you that. So aesthetics, really good. For the most part. With this one, it is generally pimped out to high heaven. I mean, you have got some decent use of color, recessed boards. I mean, this is your player board. This thing is a table hog. This is just two of the boards. Can you imagine how big the board is? It's huge. And then you've got sideboards. The board itself is this huge, thick monstrosity, but it's got pretty good artwork and that on it. You've then got all these different reference aids. Another sideboard. My god, this thing's got a lot in the box. And then you take off this clear red perspex cover, and you get this. Lots of thick tiles, lots of wooden pieces of pretty decent colours. I mean, at least you can tell these ones apart. And gotta give credit to Eagle Griffin. They really know how to pimp these games out well. It looks gorgeous, looks really nice. These are thick, chunky wooden pieces all through and through with, what's the word? Laser engraved patterns on them, so no stickers, thank God. Little gems, whatever you need, and thick, chunky tiles. There is one or two issues I do have here, though. Firstly, it doesn't tell you where to store things in the game again. You have to just figure it out. I mean, seriously, you went through all the trouble to get, Paul Grogan to do a 3D animated video for you and, do this massive rulebook. You couldn't stick a setup, box diagram in the rulebook somewhere. Honestly, why do publishers not do this? But that's a minor niggle, although it was a bit of a pain. I mean, some of this stuff you can kind of figure out, but this is kind of whatever you want to do with it. This, though, I got a problem with. You take off this little layer here, and you get the resources. Well, oh look, I barely tilted the game, and already they're falling out. This is problematic. But that's not even the worst part of it. If I take this out, you will see what I mean. So take these out. Whoop, careful. They barely stay on, these buildings. But here's the worst bit. Down there, you see this? These are the resource tokens, right? Those are the resource tokens. They are stored like Small World, to try and get the tokens in. And it's a pain because A, you've got to store them in there like that. But this does not detach from the rest of this. It's all one piece. So you have to get all these pieces out, store them in something like a little bowl or on the table, and then when you pack the game away, you've got to sort them all out and then carefully arrange them in this pointless little slot because you can't just simply detach the tray and take it out unless you take a craft knife to the thing. It's irritating as all get out that nobody in the design department thought that that might have been a good idea. But, you know, seriously, publishers, take a bit more time with your inserts. It's worth it. But those small gripes aside, this is a really nice looking game. You know, the aesthetics are there, the component quality is there. You're paying a mint for this game, but you're certainly getting the component quality and artwork for it. It's Ian O'Toole again. For the most part, he can't do wrong, except for the escape plan, that looks horrible, but, you know, whatever. You know, you can't always make good stuff. On to immersion, and there's certainly a lot of immersion to be had in the sense of, you know, that you're going through this Mars and you're building these buildings, you're trying to survive on Mars, you've got the shuttle going to and from. There's a good, healthy amount of theme in here, but it doesn't always feel like it's coming through. Not necessarily by means of the game mechanics. The game mechanics fit with the theme, and this is something that Vital Lacerda does well, and this is why I like a lot of his games. You know, he puts in the heavy mechanics along with a good, healthy dose of theme. But I do find times with other players, you know, they feel this, and sometimes I feel it as well, where kind of like, because the game is going on so long, you feel like it should have ended a little bit before, and there are times where you kind of feel a little bit disengaged from what's actually going on the table. And I think a lot of that comes down to what I said about the whole Mars thing being quite dry. You know, yeah, I'm building buildings all over Mars, but because 4 of the buildings of the 6 that you build are generic as all get out, it doesn't really feel that interesting to build the colony itself. You know, you're not building all the whites because you want to build all the whites. No, you're building a white now because the colony needs it to level up. You know, and you want to, you know, scab a few points here and there. You know, next minute I'll suddenly build the blue one, and right, that needed for points. You know, so you're kind of being dictated by what the colony needs rather than by what you want to do personally. And there's a little bit of disengagement here and there from that, where I kind of feel like the theme is a little lost, or the dryness is starting to peek through a little bit. I mean, this is a minor thing, because it is generally a thematic game, but I think a lot of it also comes down from the theme itself being about Mars. I mean, come on. How many more games do we need about Mars? And, you know, I think a lot of us have probably got jaded to this fact where everything is about Mars. Not any other planet. No, it's just Mars. Something about Mars is all this thing. But think of the theme of this. How entertaining is this theme of you're on Mars building a colony versus running an art gallery versus building a wine vineyard, you know, or, you know, running a car factory. You know, those themes just seem a little bit more engaging and immersive than I'm on Mars building buildings. You see what I'm saying? I mean, maybe that's my preference to theme, you know, yours might be slightly different, but it was just what I kind of got from this. But, like I say, it does a good job at trying to make a Martian theme interesting after we've seen it so many times, and I can't fault it for giving it a solid effort. What also hurts the longevity a bit more, though, is the player scaling. The player scaling, I don't think, works very well here. You know, if you play this with a maximum amount of 4 players, you will probably get the most enjoyment from the game itself, but you've got to accept that the time length is going to skew into orbit itself and get ridiculous in terms of length, like minimum 3 hours, possibly closer to 4 with setup and teach. But the thing is, you need 4 players. Because the turn order is paramount at 4 players, because there's only 8 spots and you're sharing orbit and Mars, so there's a lot of tension for which of those spots you can go for, which is great. You want that. With 3 players, you cut the length down a bit, you still have a bit of angst for that, so I think 3 player is my sweet spot, but I don't see this working with 2. The 2 player I just don't think works. Every time I've played this with 2 player, I just felt like it was not very interactive, not very tension-filled. You know, you were just basically doing your own thing, because 8 spaces with only 2 of you doesn't lead to a lot of turn order angst. And, you know, is he up in orbit? Couldn't care less. I'm down here. Is he on Mars with me? What does it really matter? And so you don't really care where you end up in turn order. It's like, are you going first on Mars? Don't really care. I just wanted this bonus. I'm not really that fussed. With 4 of you, though, whether you're going first, second, third, or fourth, if you're all on the same area, is pretty important. So I would rather play this with 4 than I would with 2, despite the length. And the other problem is that you bounce off each other's techs probably in this. So, you know, you have some tech tiles, opponents have tech tiles, and there's a rule that you can use other people's techs and scientists, like contract cards, if you are willing to give them a potential bonus for doing so. But with more players, there's more text going around. There's more text in the game, but there's more incentive to use other people's text, and a lot more of that goes on. In a two-player game, though, chances are, even though there's less text in the game, you'll probably just take some text, they'll take some text, and you just use your own text. You know, I've played a two-player game of this where nobody bounced off a single tech. And in a 3 to 4 hour game, that should not happen. You should be at least using an opponent's technology at some point. But I found with two-player games, you just don't. You know, you don't really get blocked off spaces that much, apart from the idea that this mechanic where a space gets more costly to use it, it works better again in 3 and 4 players than it does in 2. It's just, I really just don't think the two-player works here. You know, some people have disagreed, and fair play to each their own, but for me, I just didn't see it. Solo mode's pretty good though in this, you know, there's a ton of micromanagement in it though. You know, you need to be comfortable with the rules before you even look at the solo mode. But it's decent, you'll get it done in a good 90 minutes. I mean, it's going to be a long affair, and that's not, you know, including like the setup and teach you've got to do. But there's a lot of micromanagement with what you're doing with the bot, and obviously they change up the rules. So if the bot does this action, it does something different to if you do it in multiplayer. It's like learning a whole new game just to learn the solo mode. But the solo mode is still pretty decent. I don't think it's quite on par with some of the other LACERDA games. You know, I think the Gallerist had a pretty good solo. I think the Gallerist had a good. Yeah, the Gallerist had a good solo mode in it. I liked, and I think so did Vinyos. You know, Kanban's going to come out, the new one with a solo mode. I look forward to that. But yeah, this one's kind of there. So my final word on Mars is that this is one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest, Vital LACERDA game that he has put out. But it is chock full of tactics, strategy, and great aesthetics across the board. However, it has one of the steepest learning curves of any game I have played, and it is going to therefore put off people who can be overwhelmed by too many options or a lack of a linear progression of where to go, and is best suited to groups who play with each other all the time and frequently. So I do really like this on Mars. You know, I like it, and I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. I think this is definitely worth looking into if you're a heavy game fan, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of this. But where does it rank in terms of the other Vital LACERDA games? This is where it suffers a bit, because I have 5 Vital LACERDA games. I think he's done, actually, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I have 5 and he's done 7 to my knowledge. So I hate CO2 and I hate Escape Plan. Sorry, hate them both. So they're not even in the rankings. You know, 7 and 6 are those two. So the top 5. Gallerist is my number 1. Easiest to get into, great theme, great aesthetics, great heavy gameplay, the kick-out actions. I love the idea that the turns can go in different orders. Love it. Kanban, running the car factory, great theme, you know, great Sandra mechanic. I can't wait for the reprint to come out. That's going to be amazing. Didn't back it, but, you know, I live in the UK, you know, postage, it's a thing. But I'll definitely be buying it when I get it, when it comes out in the UK. Definitely. Not, no hands down. Love it. Third one, Vinyos. Love the wine theme. It's a little bit harder to get to grips with some of the rules in it, but once you do, it's a great winemaking game, and this is the 2016 version, not the 2010 overly complicated bank mechanic, whoopee-doo. You know, the Mary Poppins sequel didn't work because I had a bank as a villain. I don't need the bank as a villain in the Vinyos board game. But on top of that, number 4 would be either this or Lisboa. And I'm probably going to give the edge to Lisboa, because even though you have to give a history lesson to teach that game, it still felt a little easier to teach that one than it did this. And even then, I love the card mechanic in Lisboa. I mean, that card mechanic is brilliant. I love it. I love the fact you've got those 3 guys to advise, and the sort of city building, even though it's a bit of an abstract thing in this, is still quite cool. And you do get rewards for doing stuff. This one doesn't feel like it rewards you for doing stuff. You kind of need to be, you know, doing stuff, otherwise you won't get anything the next time. But it's that massive, it's that disengagement that I get sometimes from, you know, the theme with, you know, what everything feeling a little bit generic at times, but also just that sheer barrier to entry. I'm not the sort of person who's going to be able to get this to the table with the same 3 players all the time, and I just do not want to teach this to new players all the time, where I know it's going to drag the game out to something like 4 to 5 hours. I just will not be able to take it. But I still like the game. I'm still going to keep it in this spot in my collection. You've already seen it in my videos. I still think it's good, and I would not be surprised if some people out there put this as their number 1 Vital LACERDA game. And when I say it's my 5th out of 7 favourite LACERDA games, that's still good. We're going by rankings of 10, 9, and then eventually 8. So 8 for On Mars. And then you go from 8 to like 3 for Escape Plan, and probably lower for CO2. Or sorry, it's a bit of a jump. So this is not saying that On Mars is a bad game. I really like it, but it's definitely not for everybody. It's definitely got a high barrier to entry, and it is definitely well suited to frequent groups more than anything. I cannot stress that enough. So, with all that being said, thank you for watching. If you like what you see, then please subscribe, ring the bell, and subscribe to the Patreon, or just share the movie on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. Get the word out there. I'd most appreciate it. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple video, hopefully with something a little bit easier to digest. And until then, regardless of whether you're stuck on Mars or floating off into space, it's still only a game, even if it will burn your brain. Take care, and I'll see you next time.